The neon lights of downtown Los Angeles cast long shadows across the cracked pavement as Michael Chen walked home from his dojo on this humid summer evening in 1982. The 28-year-old third-degree black belt had just finished teaching his last class of the day when he heard the commotion echoing from the alley behind Maple Street. Three young men in leather jackets surrounded an elderly shop owner, their voices growing louder and more threatening by the second. The man clutched a small cloth bag against his chest while backing against the brick wall of his corner grocery store. "Please, I already paid this month," the shop owner pleaded in broken English, his Korean accent thick with fear. "Business very slow. No more money today." The leader of the group, a tall man with greased back hair and worn boots, stepped closer. "Mr. Park, you know how this works. Protection costs extra when the neighborhood gets rough. That fire last week could happen to anyone." Michael had seen enough. His sensei had always taught him that martial arts were not just about physical technique, but about protecting those who could not protect themselves. He approached the group with measured steps, his hands relaxed at his sides. "Gentlemen, I think Mr. Park has made his position clear," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. "Perhaps it's time to move along." The three men turned toward him, sizing up this newcomer who dared interrupt their business. The leader laughed, revealing yellowed teeth. "This ain't your concern, pretty boy. Keep walking unless you want trouble." "I'm not looking for trouble," Michael replied, positioning himself between the gang members and the frightened shop owner. "But I won't walk away while you threaten an innocent man." The tension in the alley thickened like the smog that hung over the city. The leader nodded to his companions, and they began to spread out, trying to surround Michael. These were street fighters, used to intimidating shopkeepers and civilians, but they had never faced someone with Michael's training and discipline. The first attacker rushed forward with a wild swing. Michael deflected the punch with a simple block, then delivered a precise strike to the man's solar plexus. The attacker doubled over, gasping for air. The second came at him with a knife, but Michael's years of training took over. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it until the blade clattered to the ground, then swept his legs, sending him crashing into a pile of trash cans. The leader pulled out a chain, swinging it menacingly as he approached. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Kung Fu boy." Michael waited, watching the man's movements. When the chain came toward his head, he ducked low and moved in close, delivering an uppercut that sent the leader stumbling backward. A final kick to the chest sent him sprawling onto the asphalt. The three men gathered themselves, bruised and humiliated. The leader wiped blood from his split lip as he glared at Michael. "You think you're tough? You just signed your death warrant, hero. Nobody makes the Serpents look like fools and gets away with it." "The Serpents?" Michael asked, helping Mr. Park to his feet. "Downtown's nastiest gang," the elderly man whispered. "Very dangerous people. They control many blocks, take money from all shop owners. You should not have helped me." The leader overheard and grinned wickedly. "That's right, old man. And tomorrow morning, we're coming back with the whole crew. 20 of our best fighters are going to teach your new friend here what happens when you mess with us." As the three men limped away into the night, Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. He had acted on instinct, following his martial arts principles, but now he realized he might have put both himself and Mr. Park in greater danger. "You must leave the city tonight," Mr. Park urged, clutching Michael's arm. "These men, they do not forgive. They do not forget. Many people have disappeared after crossing the Serpents." Michael looked at the frightened man and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. As the first rays of sunlight painted the Los Angeles skyline orange and pink, Michael Chen sat cross-legged on the floor of his small apartment, deep in meditation. He had not slept since the confrontation with the Serpents, instead spending the night in contemplation and preparation. His sensei's voice echoed in his mind. A true warrior does not seek battle, but when battle comes, he must be ready in body, mind, and spirit. The sound of car engines rumbling outside broke his concentration. Michael opened his eyes and moved to the window, carefully peering through the blinds. His stomach tightened at what he saw below. A convoy of 3 beaten-up cars had pulled up in front of Mr. Park's grocery store across the street. Men in leather jackets and torn jeans emerged from the vehicles, some carrying baseball bats and tire irons. Michael counted them as they gathered on the sidewalk. 20 men, just as their leader had promised. The gang members looked like they had crawled out of the roughest parts of downtown LA, their faces hardened by years of street violence and petty crime. Tattoos covered their exposed arms, and their eyes held the cold calculation of predators who had claimed this territory as their own. The leader from the previous night stood in the center of the group, a fresh bandage covering the cut on his lip. He pointed toward Michael's apartment building while barking orders to his crew. Even from his second-floor window, Michael could see the man's rage burning like a fever. "Spread out and find him," the leader commanded, his voice carrying in the still morning air. "The kung fu hero lives somewhere around here. Check every building, every alley. When we find him, we're going to make an example that'll keep every other do-gooder in this neighborhood from ever crossing us again." Michael stepped back from the window and surveyed his modest apartment. The walls were decorated with his martial arts certificates and photographs from his training in Japan, where he had spent 2 years perfecting his technique under Master Yamamoto. His jai hung neatly in the closet, and his collection of martial arts books lined a simple wooden shelf. He had come to America 5 years ago with dreams of opening his own dojo and teaching the peaceful philosophy that came with disciplined martial arts training. The irony was not lost on him that his dedication to protecting others had now made him a target of the very violence he sought to prevent. A knock on Mr. Park's door across the street caught his attention. The elderly shop owner appeared in his doorway, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. The gang members surrounded him, and Michael could see the terror in the old man's posture even from a distance. "Where is he?" the leader demanded, grabbing Mr. Park by the shirt. "Where's your knight and shining armor now?" Mr. Park shook his head frantically, but Michael knew the man would not be able to protect him for long. The Serpents had reputation and numbers on their side, and they would not leave empty-handed. Michael made his decision quickly. He changed into his training clothes, loose-fitting pants, and a simple white t-shirt that would allow him complete freedom of movement. He laced up his canvas sneakers and took several deep breaths, centering himself for what lay ahead. As he prepared to leave his apartment, Michael's phone rang. It was his friend Detective Rodriguez from the LAPD, someone he had met during a community self-defense seminar. "Michael, I just heard chatter on the radio about gang activity in your neighborhood," Rodriguez said urgently. "There's been reports of the Serpents mobilizing. You need to stay inside and call us if you see anything suspicious." "It's too late for that, Carlos," Michael replied quietly. "They're here because of me. If I don't face them now, they'll tear this neighborhood apart looking for me. Don't be a hero, man. These guys play for keeps. Wait for backup." Michael hung up the phone and walked to his door. Through the peephole, he could see 2 gang members checking apartment doors on his floor, working their way down the hallway. Their voices grew louder as they approached. He opened the door before they reached it. The 2 gang members froze when Michael stepped into the hallway, their hands instinctively reaching for the weapons tucked in their belts. One was a stocky man with a scar running down his left cheek, while the other was younger, probably no more than 19, with nervous energy that made his hands shake. "Well, well," the scarred man sneered. "Looks like we found our hero. You saved us the trouble of kicking down doors." Michael raised his hands peacefully. "I'm the one you're looking for. Let's take this outside, away from the innocent people in this building." The younger gang member pulled out a switchblade, the metal gleaming under the fluorescent hallway lights. "You think you're going to walk out of here after what you did to Snake last night? I don't want any more violence," Michael said calmly, though every muscle in his body was coiled and ready. "But if you insist on this path, I won't run from it." The scarred man spoke into a walkie-talkie clipped to his jacket. "Boss, we got him. 3rd floor, apartment building across from the Korean shop. He's coming down voluntarily." Static crackled back with the leader's voice. "Bring him to the street. It's time for the whole neighborhood to see what happens to heroes." Michael walked between the 2 gang members toward the stairwell, his breathing steady and controlled. As they descended, he could hear the building's residents whispering behind their locked doors. Families with children lived here, working people who just wanted to get through each day safely. His choice to help Mr. Park had put all of them at risk. When they emerged onto the sidewalk, the full scope of the Serpent's response became clear. 20 men had positioned themselves strategically around the street, blocking both ends to prevent escape. Some carried makeshift weapons, chains, pipes, and bats, while others relied on their fists and boots. They had turned the quiet residential block into an arena for violence. The leader, who Michael now knew was called Snake, stood in the center of the group with his arms crossed. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across his angular face, emphasizing the cruel satisfaction in his eyes. "There he is, boys," Snake announced. The man who thinks he can waltz into our territory and make us look weak. What's your name, hero? I want to know what to put on your headstone. Michael Chen, he replied simply, taking his position in the center of the circle that had formed around him. And I'm not looking to be anyone's hero. I just couldn't stand by and watch you threaten an innocent man. Snake laughed bitterly. Innocent? Nobody's innocent in this neighborhood, Chen. Everyone pays their dues, everyone shows respect, or everyone learns the hard way. You chose the hard way. The gang members tightened their circle, and Michael could feel the weight of their collective hatred pressing against him. These were not trained fighters like he was accustomed to facing in tournaments. These were desperate men who fought for survival, territory, and reputation. They would not follow rules, show mercy, or respect any code of honor. Mr. Park appeared in his shop doorway, his face pale with fear and guilt. Several other neighbors had gathered at their windows, drawn by the commotion but afraid to intervene. Michael realized that this moment would define not just his own fate, but the future of everyone who called this neighborhood home. 20 against 1 seems a bit unfair, Michael observed, loosening his shoulders and shifting into a ready stance. But then again, you probably need the advantage. The insult hit its mark. Several gang members stepped forward angrily, but Snake held up his hand to stop them. Nobody moves until I give the word, Snake commanded. I want to savor this. Chen, you got any last words before we teach this neighborhood what happens to people who cross the Serpents? Michael's mind flashed to his training in Japan, to the ancient principles his master had drilled into him. A warrior's strength comes not from his ability to harm others, but from his willingness to sacrifice himself for what is right. Pretty words, Snake spat. Let's see how pretty you look when we're done with you. Boys, take him apart piece by piece, but keep him breathing. I want him to remember this beating for the rest of his short life. The first 4 attackers rushed him simultaneously from different directions, their weapons raised and their faces twisted with violence. Michael centered himself, drew upon years of discipline and training, and prepared to face the greatest test of his martial arts career. Time seemed to slow as the 4 attackers closed in on Michael from all sides. The man to his left swung a baseball bat in a wide arc, while the one to his right thrust forward with a tire iron. Behind him, another gang member lunged with a chain, and the 4th came straight ahead with his fists raised. Michael's years of training took over. He dropped low and spun counterclockwise, sweeping the legs of the bat-wielding attacker, while simultaneously blocking the tire iron with his forearm. The chain whistled over his head as he continued his rotation, and he drove his elbow backward into the stomach of the man behind him. The first attacker hit the pavement hard, his bat clattering away. Michael grabbed the tire iron and twisted it from the second man's grip, then used it to block a punch from the 4th attacker. In one fluid motion, he struck 2 pressure points on the man's arm, causing him to cry out and stumble backward. Impossible, Snake muttered, watching his men struggle against a single opponent. Rush him all at once. Don't give him room to move. 6 more gang members charged forward, abandoning any pretense of strategy. Michael found himself in the center of a violent storm, ducking under swinging fists, deflecting weapons, and striking back with precise, measured techniques. His sensei had taught him that true martial arts was not about causing maximum damage, but about neutralizing threats with minimum force necessary. A pipe came toward his head, and he caught the attacker's wrist, redirecting the momentum to send the man crashing into 2 of his companions. Michael's movements were like a deadly dance, each step calculated, each block flowing seamlessly into a counterattack. Despite his skill, the sheer number of opponents began to take its toll. A fist caught him in the ribs, and he felt the sharp pain of what might be a cracked bone. A chain wrapped around his ankle, nearly sending him to the ground before he managed to break free. Blood trickled from a cut above his left eye where someone's ring had caught him. He's tiring out, Snake shouted. Keep the pressure on. More gang members joined the fray, and Michael found himself fighting 12 men at once. His breathing became labored, and sweat mixed with blood on his face. For every attacker he neutralized, 2 more seemed to take his place. The circle was tightening, and his space to maneuver was shrinking. Just when it seemed the overwhelming numbers would finally bring him down, the sound of sirens pierced the morning air. Detective Rodriguez's voice boomed through a police megaphone from the end of the street. LAPD, everyone on the ground now. Drop your weapons! 3 police cruisers had arrived, their red and blue lights flashing against the apartment buildings. The gang members hesitated, torn between their desire for revenge and their instinct for self-preservation. Snake's face twisted with rage. "This isn't over, Chen! The Serpents don't forget, and we don't forgive. Next time there won't be any cops to save you." Several gang members began to scatter, running toward the alleyways and side streets they knew better than the police. Others dropped their weapons and raised their hands, recognizing that escape was impossible. Michael stood in the center of the chaos, breathing heavily and bleeding from multiple wounds. Around him lay 6 gang members who were either unconscious or too injured to move. The remaining attackers were either fleeing or surrendering to the arriving officers. Detective Rodriguez approached him with his weapon drawn but pointed at the ground. "Jesus, Michael, what the hell happened here?" "They came looking for a fight," Michael replied, wiping blood from his eye. "I just gave them what they were asking for." As the police began arresting the gang members who had not escaped, Michael looked toward Mr. Park's shop. The elderly man stood in his doorway, his eyes wide with amazement and gratitude. Other neighbors had emerged from their buildings, whispering among themselves about the man who had stood alone against 20 attackers. But Michael knew this was far from over. Snake had escaped with several of his men, and the Serpents' reputation in the neighborhood had been damaged. They would be back, and next time, they would be even more dangerous. 3 weeks had passed since the street battle with the Serpents, and the neighborhood had begun to change in ways Michael never expected. Word of his single-handed stand against 20 gang members had spread throughout the Latino and Korean communities that called this area home. People who had previously hurried past each other with their heads down now stopped to talk on street corners. Michael sat in Mr. Park's grocery store, an ice pack pressed against his still-healing ribs, while he helped the elderly man reorganize his shelves. The shop had seen more customers in the past few weeks than it had in months, as neighbors made a point of supporting the man who had nearly been terrorized by the Serpents. "You should not have stayed," Mr. Park said for the 100th time, his English improving with each conversation they shared. "Very dangerous for you here still." "This is my home now," Michael replied, carefully stacking cans of soup. "Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on you troublemakers." The bell above the shop door chimed, and Detective Rodriguez entered, his expression serious but not alarmed. He had become a regular visitor, both as a friend and as the police officer assigned to monitor gang activity in the area. "Any word on Snake and his remaining crew?" Michael asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Rodriguez shook his head. "They've gone underground. My sources say they're regrouping somewhere in East LA, but the Serpents' control over this neighborhood is broken. The other shop owners have stopped paying protection money, and smaller gangs know better than to try moving in." It was true. The vacuum left by the Serpents' retreat had not been filled by another criminal organization. Instead, something unexpected had happened. The community had begun to organize itself, with shop owners looking out for each other and residents taking more pride in their streets. Michael's small dojo had also transformed. What had once been a struggling martial arts school with a handful of students had become a community center of sorts. Parents brought their children to learn discipline and self-defense, while adults attended evening classes to build confidence and physical fitness. Sensei Chen called Maria Santos a single mother whose 12-year-old son had started training after witnessing the street fight. "Roberto wants to know if you can teach him the technique you use to disarm the man with the chain." Michael smiled as he watched the boy practice his basic stances with the other young students. "Roberto, before you learn advanced techniques, you must master the fundamentals. Show me your horse stance." The boy groaned but obediently sank into the wide-legged position, his thighs burning as he held the pose. Around him, a dozen other children and teenagers followed suit, their faces reflecting the same mixture of determination and discomfort that Michael remembered from his own early training. As the evening class concluded, Michael gathered his students in a circle, as was his custom. The group had grown to include not just children, but their parents and other adults who had been inspired by the events of that morning 3 weeks ago. "Remember," Michael told them, his voice carrying the wisdom his own sensei had shared with him years ago. "Martial arts is not about proving you are stronger than others. It is about becoming strong enough to protect what matters most: your family, your community, your principles." An elderly Latino man named Carlos, who owned the corner barbershop, raised his hand. "Sensei, what if the Serpents come back? What if they bring more men next time?" Michael considered the question carefully. "If they return, they will not find the same neighborhood they left behind. They will find a community that stands together, that looks out for one another. One person standing alone can be overwhelmed, but a united community is much harder to intimidate. After the students had left, Michael walked through the quiet streets, noting the small changes that had taken place since that violent morning. Mrs. Rodriguez had planted flowers in the small patch of dirt outside her apartment building. The teenagers who used to loiter aimlessly on the corners were now attending his classes or helping elderly neighbors with their groceries. Even the graffiti that had once marked territorial boundaries was being painted over with community murals. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You think you won, but this ain't over. The Serpents remember. We're coming back stronger." Michael deleted the message without responding. Snake and his remaining followers might indeed return someday, but they would find a very different reception waiting for them. The neighborhood had learned something valuable from witnessing one man's willingness to stand up for what was right. They had learned that they too could be brave, that they too could make a difference. As he reached his apartment building, Michael looked back at the street where he had faced 20 attackers with nothing but his training and his principles to protect him. The morning sun was beginning to rise again, painting the sky in the same orange and pink hues he had seen on that fateful day. He climbed the stairs to his apartment, grateful for the peace, but ready for whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. The black belt who had stopped a street gang had become something more than a martial artist. He had become a symbol of hope for an entire community, proof that sometimes one person's courage could inspire others to find their own strength. In the distance, children's laughter echoed from the playground that had once been too dangerous to use after dark. Michael smiled and closed his door, knowing that the neighborhood's transformation was just beginning.